Ready? All right, it's 6:07. This is January 1st. I'd like to call June 1st. I'd like to call the Beavercreek Township Zoning Commission meeting to order. Roll call.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Geis?
Here.
Ms. Horton?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Here.
Ms. Stalder?
Here.
Mr. Hill?
Here.
All right, perfect. We are welcoming Mr. Hill today. He is not currently being sworn in for, I'm not sure what reasons, but to welcome you as an alternate member of our board and to make certain that you understand this evening you have voice but not vote, and do not hesitate to speak your mind. If you feel like you have something to say and you aren't being called upon, please just feel free to speak up. Okay, perfect. All right. We have a quorum, correct? So now we can do roll call. Oh, we did roll call. Okay, so now I want to make certain before we begin that the public notices went out as required.
Yes, ma'am.
And that all members here have received the documents in time to read the documents, and that everyone has read what has been sent to us. All right. And that that's it. That's it. Okay. Did the roll call. Before the agenda is approved, I want to make certain that that's it. I think that's it for now. Okay. All right.
Very quickly, before you approve the agenda, I would just like to amend it to hear case 835 and then case 834.
I think that's what my notes were about to say, is to make certain that we're going to look at 835, which is the
Specific site plan.
site plan, and then we will look at the land use plan.
Yes.
All right. I need a motion to approve the agenda, please, with that amendment.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Geis?
Yes.
Ms. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Ms. Stalder?
Yes.
Thank you, board. If you are ready, I will begin with the public hearing notice for this case. So case number 835, the purpose of the hearing is so that the zoning commission may review and act on an application from Roy Sukesh Paglia Rainbow is the company name, with the approval of the property owners Kerwin Yellow LLC and Kerwin Blue LLC for approval of a specific site plan application for a residential subdivision. The proposed subdivision is to be located on two parcels, and those are B03-0002, 0043, 0015600, and B03-0002, 0043, 0015000. Those are within the Stonehill Village Master Plan community, north of Overbrook Boulevard at the intersection with Treybine Road on the east side of Treybine. This section of Stonehill Village has been approved by the township for residential development. I do have a staff report for the board if they are ready. Okay, so a bit of an introduction. The applicant in this case, the company name is Paglia Rainbow, again with consent of the property owners mentioned before. The applicant has submitted a site plan pursuant to Article 17.07 of the Beavercreek Township zoning resolution. The site plan is for a residential development known as Countryside at Stonehill Village. It's located within the Stonehill Village PUD. It's located within Zone 2 of the PUD, and I'm just going to quickly bring us to this map, which is the part of the approved zoning resolution that created or most recently amended, I should say, the Stonehill Village PUD. So this is Zone 2. It's listed for R1, R2, and R3 levels of density, and that then is explained in the document itself. Zone 2, or rather the R densities, R3 maximum of 8, R2 3 to 4. So that gives you an idea of what the density was approved for this area, which is all the way up to 8 dwelling units an acre. The development is situated on about 78.58 acres and will contain 161 proposed dwelling units. It results in a calculated density of 2.048. So units an acre, that's well below the acceptable limit of 8. So it is within that requirement. So again, the 2 existing parcels that we listed earlier will serve as the development site. The owners of these parcels did provide an affidavit allowing the applicant to apply on their behalf. That's in your packet as well. It's identified for residential use in the township's comprehensive land use plan, and the site plan application meets the standards of completeness set forward in Article 17.07.5 of the zoning resolution. A little bit of context for the development. So Paglia Rainbow and their civil engineer, Kimley Horn, have been working closely with staff and Greene County agencies to ensure the site plan is driven by input from the community. Through multiple meetings, the plan has evolved and now reflects input from the engineer and sanitary engineering. Staff found the applicant to be collaborative and cooperative. It's important to note that this site plan is not the final engineering phase for the development. We often make this note when we're talking about site plans. When the trustees or the zoning commission recommends or approves a site plan, the developer must then go through the subdivision approval process with Greene County Regional Planning. During that multi-phase process, many county agencies provide official recommendations which may necessitate changes to the site plan approved by the trustees originally. So site plans can be approved with conditions that require subdivision approval by Greene County Regional Planning, as we've done in the past. That just provides another layer of scrutiny to ensure that the development occurs harmoniously. It occurs, in harmony with our resolution and with their subdivision standards. So staff has submitted the site plan for an initial review from Greene County Regional Planning, Sanitary Engineering, and the county engineer. Regional Planning and Sanitary provided an initial copy of the site plan that confirms that no concerns exist that cannot be managed during the subdivision approval process. An email from the county engineer, which was included in the case packet as well, serves the same purpose for her office. So staff we are quite confident that the 3 main approval agencies that will look at this at the subdivision phase essentially approve the zoning, if that makes sense. So we have Article 17.07.12, which is the standards of approval for a specific site plan. And this is kind of the criteria that the zoning commission will want to use when determining if this site plan should be recommended or not. And so what we've done, as we've done in the past, is list these criteria and then respond with how staff feels the site plan does or does not meet those criteria. So the first one, the specific site plan complies with the purpose and intent of this zoning resolution. We believe that it does, and it also complies with the zoning resolution which created the Stonehill Village PUD and lists its allowable densities as well. The proposed development carries out the purpose and intent of the land use plan. So both the township's comprehensive land use plan and Greene County's Perspectives 2020 planning document identify the area as planned residential use, and it is within the urban service boundary. Number 3, the proposed development promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the present and future inhabitants of the township. We believe that it's been preliminary reviewed by sanitary engineering for water and sewer, and the county engineer for traffic and stormwater management. We think it will provide sufficient infrastructure to support the health, safety, and welfare of the township, but further site engineering via the regional planning subdivision process will also increase those outcomes, those health, safety, and welfare outcomes. Number 4, the specific site plan substantially complies with the substantial conformance requirement of section 17.07.6 of this resolution. Having reviewed the resolution, most recently modifying the Stonehill Village PUD, which we showed you earlier, staff concludes that the specific site plan conforms with the approved PUD. The use of single-family residential is permitted within Zone 2, and the density of 2.04 dwelling units an acre is below the maximum threshold of 8 units an acre. Open space accounts for 33.4 acres, or about 42.5% of the total developed acreage, which is within the acceptable range described in the Stonehill PUD governing resolution. Number 5, the proposed development has no significant detrimental impact that outweighs the development's benefits to the community. So again, through discussion with various county agencies, the proposed development will not result in a detrimental impact that outweighs its benefits. Any detrimental impacts like an increase in the public safety resource usage for additional residences or maintenance costs of additional roads, those things we believe are outweighed by the benefit to the community of multifamily housing, by additional residential revenue that will be derived from it. Number 6, the proposed streets and driveways on the site of the proposed development will be adequate to serve the residents, occupants, or users of the proposed development. And the specific site plan, along with any necessary off-site vehicular circulation improvements, provides adequate vehicular ingress and egress and will be accessible from current or planned public thoroughfares which were adequate to carry traffic, which will be imposed on them by the proposed development. So actually 2 existing traffic studies which were completed in service of the Hillside Farms and the Courtyards residential developments, which this board has previously looked at. Those 2 traffic studies combined have previously already determined the ingress and egress configuration for this development. So no new cut-ins to major thoroughfares are proposed for this. It already exists. Only internal roads are proposed. The county engineer, again, has taken a look at those, finds no issues that can't be dealt with at the regional planning technical review level. So we believe that it does meet this 6th criteria. The 7th, the proposed development minimizes conflicts between vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle circulation patterns and movement. Staff has identified several lengths of multi-use pathway situated throughout the proposed development, which do allow for non-vehicular transportation through the developed area. Again, meeting with the county engineer, we're confident that the proposed roadway configuration minimizes conflict between motorized and non-motorized traffic throughout the development. The 8th criteria is that the benefits of the proposed development mitigate any burden on public services and facilities, including fire and police protection. We talked about this a little bit already, but along with our own requirements for fire prevention, we believe that this subdivision also meets the regional planning subdivision regulations for fire prevention and other public safety. So we believe that it rather meets this criteria. The 9th, existing and proposed utility services for residential population densities and non-residential uses are adequate for the project or the projected demand during all phases of development and at full completion of development. Again, we've conducted several pre-development meetings with the developer and various county agencies to ensure that this criteria is met. The developer has included assurances. There is one water main which is currently configured as a dead end. That means it's over 300 feet in length and does not loop back into the system. That dead end will be looped per the instruction from the fire marshal and from sanitary engineering. So I will show you that once we get to the map and point that out. But there is a email included in your packet in which the civil engineer says that yes, that can be fixed. Number 10, the proposed development complies with applicable requirements and conditions of section 17.05 of this resolution. Staff confirms that it does. Number 11, each individual subsection or sub-area of the development, as well as the total development, can exist as a functionally independent environment. In the alternative, and at the discretion of the township, adequate assurance has been provided by the applicant and to the satisfaction of the township that such objective will be achieved. Now, we've talked about this one in the past. It's been determined that this particular criteria is poorly defined, it's vague, And so we do not recommend using it as a criteria for approval because I don't think it can be met in any way, shape, or form to have an individual section of any development be completely self-sufficient. I don't think that's a reasonable criteria. The 12th, the design and other amenities incorporated in the proposed development will provide increased benefits to the residents, occupants, users, and the community, and such a design and other amenities are in accord with the planned unit development provisions of the zoning resolution and other applicable resolutions of the township. Proposed amenities include a clubhouse and a sports area for residents, again, along with a network of multi-use paths. So we do believe that there are adequate amenities. And finally, the 13th criteria, the proposed development contains such covenants, easements, and other such forms of property rights and controls may be reasonably required for the maintenance and care of common, private facilities, and for the public health, safety, and welfare. If governmental ownership of common open space, recreational facilities, or other common facilities is planned, which it is not, a copy of its acceptance has been filed with the application. So the proposed development will be enfolded into the Stonehill Village Master HOA. It's widely regarded as one of the most responsive in the region. It responds to residents' concerns very quickly. The township works very well with that HOA, and so we are not concerned about any covenants and restrictions that are placed. We do believe that any covenants and restrictions will keep it in line with the kind of the vision, the image that is created in that Stonehill Village PUD area. So we believe, in summary, that it does meet these 13 criteria as listed. But we do want to talk about a couple of concerns before we get into the recommendations. So we've identified 2 areas where the site plan can be changed to improve health, safety, and welfare outcomes for the township residents. The first is storm infrastructure within privately owned parcels. So throughout the site plan, there are several areas identified as storm drainage easements which straddle to privately owned parcels or home sites, typically within what you would call a side yard setback. These drainage configurations can become problematic for 2 main reasons. And the first is that homeowners may wish to place fencing on their property lines. Fencing within storm easements could interfere with the flow of stormwater if the easements are meant for drainage above ground. And the township does not restrict fences within easements, although residents are discouraged via disclaimers on fence permit applications. We do not restrict the placement of fence within an easement. If the easement contains underground storm sewer infrastructure, like a storm pipe, then the concern is future maintenance of the infrastructure. If fencing is placed in these easements, then the township faces customer service concerns when we have to tear the fence down in order to perform maintenance on underwater pipes. There's no way to get to them without removing the fence. And because it's in an easement, the resident would not typically be entitled to reimbursement for their fence. And it would be a cost to them. Additionally, the identified building envelopes for the parcels means that homes could be situated close to the easements. So there is the possibility that homes, the edge of a home building would be very close to what amounts to a storm drainage easement. There is some concern that maintenance from the township's side, again, we're talking years and years in the future, but eventually those pipes do need to be maintained. And so when heavy machinery has to be brought in to do that, there are standard allowable widths for safe operation of that kind of machinery within a trench. We're concerned that some of these areas where the stormwater is in between 2 parcels could result in very difficult situations trying to maintain those pipes. If, for instance, 2 houses are built on either side of an easement very close to it, there may not be room even to move a heavy machine, a heavy piece of machinery in between those homes to perform maintenance. All that to say, we have worked with the civil engineer. They have given us assurances that during the regional planning phase, again, where we do have authority to say, hey, no, this doesn't meet zoning approval, we've kind of worked out a deal where we would request a condition be placed on the approval that they would reduce the number of these storm easements within private parcels and try to move as many as possible into common open space area. We know that it cannot be 100% of them. There are reasons that this is done, but we do believe that it can be reduced. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the recommendation sections. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a dead end water main, which is a length of water pipe over 300 feet that does not loop back into the system. That can result in low flow and some issues with that towards the end of that pipe, which could impact fire safety and things like that. So again, we talked about it with their civil engineer. They have agreed that there should be no problem in looping that down through to the pipe that goes under the southeastern exit from the development. So before I go into my recommendations, conditions, I want to go ahead and put the map, or the plan rather, up on the screen, and I will show you examples of what we were talking about with the dead end main and with the storm drainage, just so you can get an idea of what we are seeing here. Okay, so this is right here, you see this blue line is the water pipes, okay? This is the dead end main right here. And the plan is to have this connected over here to Calumet Way. So we believe that's a pretty easy fix. The stormwater drainage that you see these dashed lines that look like kind of a box like this. It says 15-inch STM storm, and then these ST pipes are stormwater pipes, okay? These are, as you can see, in between two private parcels like lot 147 and lot 48 would both have about 7.5 feet of storm easement on their property. We think there are some areas where this can be reduced or eliminated, and so one of the recommendations we're asking is for that reduction.
Changing the easement or by changing the routing?
It would probably be a little bit of both. There would probably be some change of routing that would need to take place, and then there may be the change of lot lines to create common open space that it
Can I
passes
ask you
through.
another question before you move on?
Sure.
The bottom left corner, you show another dead end there. It's just not long enough to be a concern to you?
That's correct. Yeah, it's 300 feet. Anything less than that is acceptable. Do we have any other questions about the map? I know you've had some opportunity to review it in your own packets, but while we're here, are there any other questions about that? If not, I'll go ahead with the recommendations. So, staff does recommend approval of the proposed specific site plan. The applicant has worked together with staff to revise the site plan to address our concerns over a couple of iterations and has agreed to continue to do so through the regional planning process. Staff believes, to the best of our knowledge, that the site plan meets all criteria for approval outlined in Article 170712, which we went through the criteria earlier. Future engineering will be completed in conjunction with Greene County Regional Planning subdivision approval process. So that's important to note, but staff recommends a series of conditions be placed on the approval of the site plan to ensure that the eventual development configuration ends up promoting the health, safety, and welfare of current and future township residents. So I have 6 conditions that I would like you to consider. The first, actually 4 are ones you are familiar with. We have placed these on the last couple of site plans that we have brought in front of you. They essentially amount to that the work done in regional planning that results in required changes to the site plan. So again, movement of lot lines and things that are a direct result of that process would not then need to come back for a minor or major modification, as would typically changes to the PUD specific site plan. Anything that is not the direct result of a comment from regional planning, like the engineer saying, hey, you need to move this road or you need to move this pipe, if they want to do it for any other reason, they would still be subject to the minor and major modification process. It's just that during the technical review, it's very common for sanitary to say, okay, you move the pipes a little bit, and then the engineer goes, okay, well, now we have to move the road a little bit. And so it will take a slightly different shape than what were approved, but we don't believe that it's necessary for it to come back to zoning commission for further approval because it is being recommended by other approving agencies. So these first four essentially amount to that, but I will read them. The first one, final approval is subject to the approval of the Greene County Regional Planning and Coordinating Commission. The site plan's final engineering shall meet all Greene County subdivision regulations. The second is any modifications to the proposed site plan resulting from final engineering during the county subdivision approval process shall be considered incidental modifications as outlined in Article 17.11.3 of the resolution, which essentially means that they can be approved administratively by me, the zoning director. Number 3, the recorded site plan filed with the Greene County Regional Planning and Coordinating Commission, it's also known as the record plan, shall serve as the revised site plan in the event of any incidental modifications made due to changes requested during that county subdivision process. And 4, final approval is subject to approval by any agency or entity with review authority. The 5th and 6th are the conditions specific to this plan that we discussed. Number 5, during the technical review period of the regional planning subdivision approval process, the developer will reduce the number of storm sewer and other drainage easements located within residential parcels. These easements will be relocated wherever possible to common open space parcels. Written approval from the Community Development and Risk Department Director that this condition has been met must be obtained by the developer to obtain final zoning approval. And number 6, during the technical review period of the regional planning subdivision approval process, the developer will eliminate the dead-end water main at the end of the cul-de-sac in the southeast portion of the development by looping the pipe into the water main located beneath Calumet Way. Again, written approval from the Community Development and Risk Department Director that this condition has been met must be obtained by the developer to obtain final zoning approval. So it cannot move forward through regional planning without these 2 written signatures, notes from our director that these have been met. So those are the 6 conditions we'll ask you to consider, along with our recommendation. I have nothing else for you in my staff report, but you did have a chance to look at the original application, the land description, the property owner affidavit that we talked about, the site plan which was included, even including a nice landscaping plan, the zoning exhibit, which is again the full breadth of the parcel, and some additional emails that speak to some of the stuff that I talked to you about in the staff report. And then finally, the resolution, which most recently modified the Stonehill Village PUD. And proof of the public hearing. So those are the pieces in your packet. Unless you have any other questions, I will turn it back over to you, board.
Okay. I need to clarify something first. You're serving as the applicant as well as, no?
No, the applicant is Paglia Rainbow, being represented here tonight by Rob
Okay, I wanted
Arnold.
to double check that before
Yes.
we moved forward. Does the board have any questions that they would like to ask staff
I
at
do,
this point?
actually.
Great.
On number 5 of your recommendation, it's very unquantified. So can you numerically give us a count for the number of concerns you have that are easement concerns? And then what does reduce mean? Is it like from 5 to 4? Or?
It was left intentionally without a quantifier because I don't believe at this time it is, I do not possess the expertise to say it should be 10 or 20 or all or 5.
Have a ballpark on the number of?
I mean, no, we don't. There needs to be a reduction. The appropriate reduction will be a collaboration between our staff and the Greene County Sanitary and Greene County Engineer. So without having them here, I can't give you any.
So this is a recommendation to work in earnest to improve the situation.
Correct.
You have other questions? Bob, you have any?
Well, I was gonna ask the same thing. I mean, Do you know how many lots this reduction is going to affect?
Again, we can't, without doing
You know
the
my
full
position on
review.
this, as far as deeding a property to somebody with an easement like that, why isn't it just kept in the homeowners association if possible to keep that as a common area, shrink the lots that it's going through side by side, so there's never any problem with somebody putting a fence on
Right.
their line.
Yeah.
I just don't like paying taxes on something that I can't use.
I agree.
So I was just curious as to how many lots this was going to affect. You know, I'd be in favor of shrinking the lots next to it or whatever, as long as it's not deeded to the homeowner that he's paying for something he can't use.
Right. And again, without having everyone in the room and
Right.
doing it kind of has to be a bit of a give and take. We have to be respectful that, this is a common occurrence. It's not that it's against subdivision regulations or anything like that, but we know that it causes issues in the future. And so it's more of a negotiation that we're doing. However, this recommendation is written in such a way that without a written consent that we believe it's been done to the best of their ability, that it cannot move forward in regional planning. So
So I have a follow-up. So I'm not familiar with this HOA and its bylaws, so I'm just curious how the HOA might clearly make that evident to the potential lot owner that, by the way, this lot has got this kind of constraint that you have to be, recognize. And you probably can't speak to that either.
yeah, I
There
cannot.
should be a recorded easement on the deed.
Yeah, typically it would be on the deed.
Right,
But
So
that
they're,
which is
Kind of
what
that.
Bob's
They should
trying to
be
talk
aware
to.
of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Title company, when you at a closing, will go over all of the easements and those types of things.
So it should be clear up front.
During a closing process, yes.
most people are aware of their easements. They're aware that they have an easement. They're not fully aware of
What they
what that could mean
Ramifications.
over the
I
decades
don't
they
have a
might
problem
live
with
in.
easements. I have a problem with what they tried to do as far as getting the permission of the easement holder to do something on your own property.
So let's go to the left and see, Krista, do you have any questions?
Not this time.
Mr. Hill, do you have any questions? Okay, I have a question, a few.
Sure.
All right. One question that I have is really about those easements and how would one define fencing if in fact you're going to put a hold on that? There's above ground fencing and then there's below ground fencing. And I think that would be something that might be important to know and understand on that. But
Yeah. So again, we do not, as you remember,
but we have it in our rules about fencing, and you're making a recommendation about it. So I think we need to be able to have a working.
Well, I guess I don't understand. What do you mean we have it in our rules about fencing?
We have rules about fencing.
Yes, but not. We at one point had attempted to amend our zoning resolution to disallow fencing within recorded
Correct.
easements. That's no longer the case.
Okay.
So there is no reason a resident could not put a fence in the easement. Like
They're
we
going to
wouldn't
be
stop them from
responsible if they
zoning.
put it on there and they have to come. and
We
do it.
try to warn them with
Okay.
disclaimers. Hey, this is what could happen when you place structures in recorded easements, but we will not stop you from doing it.
Okay. On the item number 2 on the recommendations, you talk about the incidental modifications outlined in 17.11.3, and you talked about it being minor and major modifications. I thought it was just minor.
So there are 3 levels of modifications.
Correct.
There are minor, major, and incidental, and they are basically levels of severity.
Uh-huh.
Typically, a minor or a major modification would have to come back to the zoning commission.
Correct.
And a major would also have to go back to the trustees.
Right.
What we're saying is often the kind of changes that are made in the regional planning subdivision process, like moving a road, would fall under a major modification normally. And it would normally require another visit to you and the zoning and the
Correct.
trustees. Because they are bound to make these changes in order to meet the subdivision approval process, we believe it's an unjust burden to make them come back and also have you and the trustees say, yes, the engineer did say you need to move that road 20 feet. Thank you. That's what it amounts to. But staff has, in the past, received requests to make changes that were not directly the result of a regional planning comment, and we still required them to go through either the minor or the major modification process. So that's kind of the difference, is why are they making the change?
Right. Well, I was just under the impression that when you used the Article 17.11.3, incidental modifications did not include major. So I was not correct on that. I thought it was just in the process, if there was a minor modification, that you didn't have to come back to us. I wasn't under the impression that if it was a major modification, like a road change, that we had to. So that's why I was clarifying.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, all right. The drainage that you're doing is, help me with the map. Is there any detention or retention ponds that are planned with that?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
bring that back here.
One even has a bench.
That's what I thought. Thought I
Oops,
saw
that
that.
was too far. So yes, these large areas here,
Uh-huh.
wet basin, wet basin, wet
And those are
basin.
gonna be new ones to that area, correct?
Correct,
So
correct.
my question then is around, has anyone from the health department taken a look at how much mosquito repellent we're using and the impact on residents?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then the last thing that I had was, if you scroll down to the engineer's email, it seems like the engineer still had a lot of questions, even though she was saying there's a preliminary okey dokey here. But, and there was some sort of initials that were put on the
Yes.
site plan itself.
Correct, on the
But there
front
are a lot of
page.
questions. And so my thought is it cleaner to have some of these questions answered before we get to the next phase of this work? It seems a little loose not to have it more sound than this.
I don't know that I necessarily agree. I think the engineer was trying to communicate in advance what kind of concerns she might have at the technical review
Okay.
level. For instance, are they going to daisy chain the ponds across the site? Means are they linked for stormwater
And I don't know what
drainage?
daisy chaining
Right.
is.
So that's like, that's saying, are you linking the drainage of the ponds to one another? Does the site travel through the ponds and then out the back?
Above, below, squills or whatnot, correct?
Those-
Swales.
We believe that any questions that were asked by the engineer are firmly in the realm of regional planning technical review and not in the realm of zoning approval, not in the realm of land use. Does that make sense?
It does. Are you guys good with that when it comes to the boundary setting and all of that easement discussion that is in our realm? Because I wasn't.
So I'm
I
just curious,
wasn't.
what's the purpose of this? Is just full disclosure, it's a work in progress. These questions are getting answered, but they really don't have anything directly to do with the zoning.
They are definitely the technical aspects of it and not the land use aspects of it that we deal with. I'm still working with the engineer in helping her understand what the initial review, what we are looking for from that initial review. I think part of it is that she is already thinking about regional planning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
So,
does.
yeah.
Well, those questions are still left unanswered for me, so we can move on the agenda and make certain that the applicant maybe has some more
I was
information.
just
they can
going to
share with
suggest
us.
that
Yeah,
some
great.
of these
Sounds
might
good.
be
Plan.
addressed by the applicants, so.
Okay.
All right, if
I'm
there's
ready.
nothing more for me, go ahead and open up the public comments.
Okay, so the process now is to open up for public comments. We'll listen first to those who are in support of, then anyone who's neutral, and anyone who is then followed by anyone who is against. And we usually set time limits on it, but could I take a show of hands on For this particular case, we're not talking about the next case, who is here just to discuss this case? 1, 2, 3, so
Well, so you have the applicants.
they're
Besi-
next.
Yes,
Okay.
besides them, it looks like just one
Okay,
additional.
so 1. So we should hear from the applicants before I open the public portion of the meeting. Okay, I'm ready to hear from the applicants, please.
I'm Rob Arnold, partner on the development. As usual, Max, you did a great job representing the intent of the community. I will say this, I mean, most of you know we've done a lot of developing around here. We've developed over 2,000 lots in the Beavercreek area. And to be honest, I have yet to have one storm ever dug up. I tell you what they do have problems with a lot is sewer and water laterals. You see that done all the time, but those are in front yards, so that's not really an issue. The only time that you really will have a problem with a storm coming in between a lot of it if it has been undersized. Would you agree with that? So, I mean, they're in big concrete pipe. That's the big concrete pipe that you see on the side of the roads and all that. That's what you have underground, and it's usually the top of that pipe is usually 18 inches to 2 foot, from the top of the surface. So it's well underground generally. Now it can come a little closer in some cases and a little deeper in some cases, but it's really not a huge concern because, like I said, I have never had one in any of our developments ever get dug up. So we have had sewer and water dug up, and really mostly because Greene County continues to stick with copper laterals, and copper just doesn't last forever. So if you see them digging up water mains, and water laterals in people's yards, that happens because over time copper will basically deteriorate and get little pinholes in it and start to leak. But anyways, other than that, I mean, the product we're putting here is not dissimilar to some of the other product that we have that you've seen out there in the community. They're all single family, of course, a variety of, we still have lots of 1-story, single family, houses, but there's also, the availability for 2 stories and different types of products just to make it a more inclusive community. I think it'll be pretty diverse as far as ranches and 2 stories and residents as well. So we're here to answer any questions, any specific questions. But since the storm came up, so readily, I just thought I would throw my little bit in. So I appreciate your time and your effort. And I don't know, Mike, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't have anything additional.
Okay.
As the engineer, I'm here to answer any questions as well.
Yeah, well, we're both here, so.
Well, do you all have any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Arnold? What's daisy chaining?
Daisy chain. Well, it's when something's tied together. It's almost like when they in electric, they call it the same thing. Like if you have an electrical outlet on the wall there,
Yeah.
and then it goes, instead of running a separate line to that next receptacle, they just run another one, from that receptacle to that one. So it's sort of like daisy chained, and they're all kind of tied together. So bad news, if that one goes out, they're all going out. Instead of having each one, when you go, they call that a home run when each one is done separate.
I was thinking like flowers. It's not. It's like embroidery. Got
Yeah.
it. Like a chain. Sorry. Chain. Sorry, I didn't know.
Hence
You're
the
right.
name.
You're
Thank
a
you.
visual learner.
I'm such a visual learner. Okay. Now I'd like to go ahead and open the public portion of the meeting. Since there's one of you, take your time and we'll tell you if it's too much. Yes, please come to the podium, state your name, your address.
Okay. My name is Dick Taylor. I live at 1213 Stallion Run, which I think is going to back up to this. I'd like to see a plan. And I had a question for Mr. Arnold. How many houses did you say per acre?
It's about 2.
2. So you're going half-acre lots, basically.
Well, no, see, when you got to figure, you got streets and then green space, and especially this community has tons of green space. and tons of amenities, so, you know, they're all different size lots, I mean.
we can,
That's more of a might.
yeah.
I mean, you said 2 to 8. You
right.
threw that
the-
out there, so I'm thinking, well, they could put 8 on an acre, or they could put,
Now, eight was what the zoning was on the property. We're doing 2, so we're basically throwing 6 out the window.
okay, 2 sounds, I understand that. It's gonna be close to a half acre, may not be a half acre.
It's about an average of about a quarter to a third of an acre for the
So
lot
they're
size.
downsizing, okay.
Okay.
So they're,
Providing community green space and trails in the additional area.
I understand that, they got that throughout our plans, okay. Let me think, what else? I had something else I need to ask you. Are these gonna be custom homes?
Yes.
Okay. Like you usually build? Okay. Let me think, what else? I should have
Want
brought
to
my
see the
notes in.
community and where yours backed up? There's a picture that.
Yeah, I
you
did, I
mentioned.
wanted to see where it backs up
And
to.
is it within 500 feet? Like, did he get a phone? Did he get a letter?
I got a map,
Oh, God.
no, I didn't get a map.
You
I just got
didn't
a
get a map, you
letter.
just got a letter, okay.
just got a
perfect.
letter, that,
Got
I would
it.
like to see how it looks,
Okay, great.
if I'm
Tell
allowed.
you what, of
You're
course. What we're gonna do is bring up the GIS.
Which house is yours?
I don't know, I have to look on the map.
You're in here, right?
Yes, I'll be up in here somewhere. Yeah, this is probably Stallion Run right here, correct? I would
Yes.
say it is.
It is.
I'm right here.
What was your address again, sir?
I think it's 1213.
1213 Stallion Run.
Great.
I don't understand. So this must be back of my yard right here, correct?
Sir, if you wanna take a look,
You get-
so
you get a
here's
new
your
neighborhood.
property.
Yeah.
And this is the edge of the development that's proposed, so yes, you do back up to the development.
Okay, there won't be no walkway back here then, no. No walkway back here. So the lot is just gonna back up to mine. These are, what is that, what's the depth on these lots?
130 feet.
That would be in the site plan, I mean, they can't do it without it.
I think they're about the same. I think they're similar.
The final
in depth,
approval on the
probably,
site
to the ones you had.
And you're 40 feet off the street. Is that the standard?
25 feet off the right of way.
The house?
The house would be 25 feet off the
So you're
back
asking
of the
if they
sidewalk.
decide to change the density of
Off the back of the sidewalk.
Is that an incidental?
I was just wondering what's going on behind it. You got a proposed date? Okay,
Next year sometime.
next year sometime. I just had questions,
That's
that's all.
fine.
I thought there'd be a group
Perfect.
of us here, nobody showed up. They was all
Well, you
complaining.
can come back anytime you want.
They were all complaining, so I thought
They're all
I
complaining.
should've stayed on 3 acres.
You should.
See what that's. what people
Miss
do.
ya,
They just
yeah.
complain, but they don't participate.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys.
All right, great. Now I'm going to close the public portion of the
If there's
meeting.
anybody against it.
Is there anybody against it? Anybody neutral? He
I
was the
think you
only one
already
that
are- you
raised
asked
his
that.
hand.
Yeah.
All right.
Robert,
So
sure.
now we're closing the public portion of the meeting. Now, we usually just have discussion between the zoning members, correct? All right. So, any of us have any questions that we now need to ask?
I got a question on the fencing. We're talking about going into the easement. You mentioned that the piping is generally 18 to 24 inches below the ground, right? So is the piping going to be on the easement where if a homeowner tries to dig a post hole, they're going to hit that concrete barrier? Or are they further out?
It's usually not right on the line, I mean, and it's not that big of a pipe. They're all different size pipes, which is part of the reason why I think it's hard to identify some of the issues that can be changed and the ones that can be changed. When you have a lot of water heading down to a certain area and the pipe gets larger, those pipes are harder to move than the smaller pipes, you know, in other areas. So that's kind of the give and take, I think that Max talked about.
Is that part of the HOA discussion, though? Because you should be calling oops or somebody before you dig, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, always. If anybody were to post hole or anything, they should be calling oops to have it marked out where it's safe to do so. Yes,
And then
but
I just had one question, in rerouting all these and maybe reconfiguring some of the things and trying to get rid of some of the easements,
If the density would happen to change, would that be an incidental?
No. So, well, let me put it this way.
So they
If
might-
the density decreases,
No, I was just
which
reading that.
would be the likely result because there would be more open space to the same number of lots, then no.
Well, I mean, if they're in that, well within the
but
regulations
even
of 8 and they, you know,
any
use up have more open space, but then to increase the density,
any increase in density over the 2.04 listed here would have to come back for
Okay.
a
Okay.
modification.
I'm just curious.
All right. Any other questions?
I did want to quickly address, while I had the opportunity, you asked about mosquitoes.
Yes.
I got some information. Basically, it seems that the increased water flow is probably the most effective method for preventing mosquitoes. If that was your concern, was that these
I didn't understand the question.
ponds
Well,
were
right, and so are those have inflow and outflow, correct? But that's not a constant, it's not a real dynamic flow, right? It's kind of keeps it
Well,
from
I
being
didn't understand your
stagnant.
question.
Well, so the more,
Are you talking
Stagnant
about spraying the
water,
ground or how much repellent
more
people wear?
well, so you don't realize this, but every night, about midnight, they come with their trucks a couple of times a week and spray in all the residents that have areas that are heavy in mosquito population.
I didn't realize it.
No, they do. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And so when you have the retention ponds, it's not enough flow to keep mosquito larvae down.
Just Stalter, if I can, these ponds do have fountains in them. They're indicated in the design to have fountains in them that's continuously leak the water. I think that's the idea behind it.
That's the idea behind them. I've just
You
never,
don't have stagnant water.
thank you for that. I'm just concerned that the health department hasn't taken a look at the amount that is in one area and that the repellent could possibly cause harm. And I think that's something we should be cognizant of, whether or not we need to add some recommendation to this. I'm open to discussion. I don't know, just having a statement from the environmental health people or from the epidemiologist might be nice.
I think it may be a little bit more of a general kind of a thing rather than pertaining to one case or another. But that being said, it's certainly what I would recommend actually is that following our cases, that we come back to that discussion and we can craft a directive from you all to staff for investigating that. Does that seem reasonable?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I don't think we need to hold up this case because of it.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, concerns? Ready for a motion then to accept this case with the conditions or recommendations set forth by the staff?
I don't have it in front of me.
Could you pull it down?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. Yes.
35.
Hang on.
And I want you to say that whole parcel number.
I did that last time, Kristen did it.
No,
Actually, if you would like
I'm
to,
not good at numbers.
if you would like to recommend approval with the conditions listed by staff, that would suffice.
Do I need the case number? Because I didn't receive the email that this case, so.
You did not?
No.
Interesting.
I haven't-
It's case number 835.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve case number 835 with the
Recommendations.
recommendations,
6 staff recommendations.
With the 6 staff
with the 6
recommendations.
recommendations by staff.
I'll second the motion.
I'm sorry, Bob, and you seconded?
Check.
We good?
We're good.
All right. Mr. Geis? No,
Yes.
excuse me. Oh, Mr. Geis, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, I meant to start with.
Yes.
Ms. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Ms. Stalter?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, board.
Was the-
Just a quick aside to the applicants, what we'll do,
Well, I
we
should copy
will
first.
have a
Did you
resolution
get the email
signed
this
by
morning?
the chair,
I never got
typically
it.
by
That's fine.
tomorrow. We'll transmit that to you. That will serve as your notice that the zoning commission recommended it. It does have to go forward to the trustees. We will be asking them for a hearing date at their next regularly scheduled meeting, not next Monday, but the following. So we will get back in touch with you. We'll give you the resolution tomorrow. We'll get back in touch with you once we have a date set with the trustees, okay? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all.
Have a great evening.
Moving along the agenda now to case number 834.
Thank you, board. I will quickly read the public notice. Case number 834, the Community Development and Risk Department brought forward a proposed amendment to the Beavercreek Township Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 51902, the township makes zoning decisions in accordance with this comprehensive plan. It's unclear to me whether an action from the zoning commission is required, but in my mind it is. And so I am seeking your recommendation. It's unclear to me legally whether this document, the comprehensive land use plan, can be amended administratively by the trustees or rather by resolution by the trustees alone or require zoning commission. I am moving forward as if it does require a zoning commission recommendation because I believe you all are very important to the process, and in the end you will be taking a look at the changes to the zoning resolution and map that will result from this. So I wanted you to be aware of that. If you are ready, I have a staff report prepared. We also have our consultants, Planning Next and Sarah Kelly, here to present to you a presentation about the process and the plan. But I would like to start with a quick staff report. So just an introduction, the Community Development Department, in conjunction with the consulting firm Planning Next, has developed a new comprehensive land use plan. We'll call it a CLUP sometimes just to save time in the document. A CLUP serves as a long-term guide which expresses the values and aspirations of a community. It is the functional blueprint for future development of Beavercreek Township, focusing on the use of land resources over the next 5 to 10 years. The name of the Beavercreek Township CLUP is the Community Plan. So you may hear this referred to as either the Community Plan or the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. They are interchangeable. This reflects the deliberate efforts of the department to include input from the Beavercreek Township community when developing the plan. We believed it's named well. If approved, staff will utilize this document as the basis for a number of crucial policy decisions regarding land use in the township. So quickly, I want to talk about the vision statement of the plan. In a plan like this, the vision statement is it's a sentiment that everything in the plan should be able to relate back to in some way. It is our vision for Beavercreek Township, what it can and should be. The vision statement is to be one of the healthiest and most sustainable townships in Greene County. The township will meet the community's current and future needs by promoting well-protected natural resources, responsive public services, high-quality housing, strong schools, and access to varied employment opportunities. I want to talk a little bit about the development process for the plan. I know the Zoning Commission, especially one member in particular, is very familiar with the development process. However, it's important for a little bit of start to finish here. So the community plan was developed over the course of approximately 12 months in 3 distinct phases. The first phase was preparation, which included an existing conditions analysis of the current population and land uses within the township. The preparation phase built the foundation for the plan moving forward by providing an accurate picture of the township as it exists today. The second phase was planning, and this phase revolved heavily around the collection of public opinion data related to desired community outcomes for land use. So what do the people want? It included an in-person open house event, an online survey, a door-to-door survey of township residents, targeted stakeholder interviews, and guidance from a 17-member steering committee. This phase allowed the planning team to understand the desires of township residents, employers, civic institutions, and other key stakeholders. And using this data, the planning team created a series of goals and objectives which reflected the public input as well as staff's own expertise. A second round of public input gathering was also performed, including in-person and online activities, to assess whether the goals identified by the planning team accurately reflected the desires of the community. So this was kind of a check-in. We think we heard you. Here's what we got. Is that right? Phase 3 is the wrap-up phase. And having identified goals that resonate with the community, the planning team developed implementation strategies for each goal. These strategies identify a timeline, additional partners, and specific actions which will be taken to achieve the goals outlined in the community plan. This phase also included editing the final community plan document to ensure it is useful to both township staff and residents. A detailed description of the development process for the community plan can be found within the document itself. There are a couple key goals and themes that the plan identifies. The plan identified a total of 69 distinct objectives, which, when achieved, will result in improved land use outcomes for Beavercreek Township. They're divided into 6 goals. Goal A, character and land use, is to maintain and enhance community character and support a mix of desirable land uses. Goal B, planning and collaboration, to implement policies for future development which are transparent, fair, consistent, fiscally responsible, and supported by the best information available. Goal C, the environment, preserve environmental resources and foster an approach to new development that is compatible with their long-term preservation. Goal D, housing, guide prospective housing quality and variety to meet a range of preferences and needs. Goal E, transportation and infrastructure, provide adequate, safe, and adaptable facilities, services, and infrastructure. And goal F, economic development, promote shared prosperity and access to gainful employment across all segments of the community. So we think that these taken together represent the will of the community as we heard it during the engagement process. The plan document itself further explores the goal categories as well as defining each of the 69 objectives in detail. 3 key themes emerged as the various objectives were considered and developed by the planning team, and those are sustainability, health and wellness, and coordination. In the plan document, objectives are linked to these key themes when appropriate. Additionally, several priority objectives were identified using a combination of resident input, steering committee input, and staff expertise. These priority objectives represent what township residents desire most from further community development. I want to talk about the character-based approach to land use that we use in the plan. This plan takes a character-based approach to shaping the future development of the township. Traditional land use plans focus primarily or even exclusively on land uses and less on how people experience their surroundings. While the character and land use chapter includes both primary and secondary land uses in each character type, it also conveys quite a bit more about the built form that is desired in each area. There are several advantages to this enhanced approach, including it describes an overall intent for the area, which helps planners and other decision makers understand whether a particular development is in the spirit of the purpose of the area. So does it fit with what the vision is for that area of land use? It helps to provide clear expectations about the physical characteristics and form of development in an easy to understand format, which conveys standards for new development that can be used to assess how successful a development may be in contributing to the community. It provides an indication of key infrastructure like sidewalks, signage, landscaping that would be beneficial or expected in a particular area. So not only what's the main use, but what are some of the accessory uses that the area needs to be successful for its vision? It allows for more flexibility in how land is used while also maintaining the intended character, look, and feel of an area. And it provides a strong foundation for zoning updates and other regulations. So how will this community plan, our comprehensive land use plan, how will it actually be used? Well, we use the CLUP, the township uses it to facilitate several important organizational functions. It serves as the legal foundation for zoning policy decisions, according to the Ohio Revised Code. The township should be able to link land use decisions to an adopted CLUP through logical connections between proposed policy actions and information in the document. Adopting the community plan does not represent an official change to either the township zoning resolution or map. Instead, it will act as a catalyst for a range of changes to those policy documents. Revisions to the zoning resolution will alter zoning rules, and revisions to the zoning map alter allowable land uses on specific parcels. The community plan will also serve as a resource to township residents, both current and prospective. When landowners in the township are considering how they will use their land, the CLUP can guide them to understanding what is currently allowable and what might be allowable. When prospective developers are considering projects in the township, the CLUP gives a concrete and legally defendable set of expectations about what types of land uses the township will or will not support for development. And I did want to bring up this, we've created this graphic here to help kind of show at a glance what goes into and then what comes out of the community plan. And basically, these are your inputs: public engagement, staff expertise, steering committee guidance, public officials, and the data analysis of existing conditions and trends. All that was thrown into a blender, and then we get the community plan. From the community plan, we will change three things: the zoning resolution, the zoning map, and our internal administrative policies. So this is designed to both help the zoning commission get a snapshot of how it will be used, but also specifically will be included in the plan itself. So residents and other people who are reading the plan can get a very clear sense of, okay, all this information is great, but it's important to know in the end what comes out of it, right? What actually changes. We think that this gets to the heart of that. So there is also the implementation matrix. This is another way that the plan will be used by the department. So a common concern among planners is that a plan such as a CLUP is developed and then not properly implemented, resulting in wasted planning effort. There's the old adage of you do a plan and then it sits on a shelf. Staff has worked extensively with the planning team to ensure that the community plan plays an active role in policy decision-making moving forward. We do not want it to sit on a shelf. This takes the form of the implementation matrix, which is included in the plan document. The matrix lists all 69 of the objectives divided into those 6 goal categories we talked about. It identifies priority objectives as discussed earlier in the report. Additionally, the matrix identifies timelines for completion for each objective. Now they are, short, medium, long term. It's not like they're, month and date, but they do give us some sense of accountability for actually implementing the goals that are listed rather than sounding really nice. In conjunction with the specific actions listed for each objective in Chapter 5 of the plan document, this matrix gives staff a tangible blueprint for taking actions which further the vision of this plan. The matrix lists primary and secondary responsible parties for each objective. So typically the primary responsible party is our department, the Community Development and Risk, but we list all of our community partners where appropriate. And in addition to serving as an internal control mechanism, it will serve as a rubric by which the Community Development and Risk Department can be held accountable. So our trustees, our steering committee, our community can look at this implementation matrix and say, you've done this or you have not. Finally, our recommendation. Staff recommends adoption of the community plan, surprising no one. As the township's comprehensive land use plan, the final document represents the culmination of community engagement, staff expertise, and collaboration with stakeholders. Staff believes the goals and themes presented in the plan reflect the desires of Beavercreek Township and its residents. Adopting the community plan will allow staff to move forward with a variety of policy enhancements designed to realize the vision of the plan document. Before we move into any questions, I would like to invite Sarah Kelly from Planning next to please come up. She has prepared a presentation for you as well. Okay?
You advance the slides, or do I have
I'd be glad to do that.
Okay, great.
Let me quickly put this in slide mode. Okay.
Great.
Oops.
Perfect. Thanks. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here. Since Max was last before you on this topic, I think in April, we have been working diligently and systematically through the comments and suggested edits that we've received from all of you, as well as from others. We're really excited and proud of where this document stands today. I think it's a better plan for the comments that we've received. So we're really appreciative of the thoughts and ideas and suggestions that you all, as well as others, provided. What I would like to do is mostly just go through some of the highlights of some of the changes that we made. I'm not going to go through every single one. In some cases, I'm kind of grouping them together just to give you an idea of sort of how we addressed certain topics. But before I do that, if you don't mind going to the next slide, wanted to just step back a minute because I think as we were working through our edits, we really wanted to make sure that we kept in mind, why we think this comprehensive plan is so important. And, what we wanted to make sure as we were making all the edits that we were going back to as sort of our touchstone was the fact that, we really see this plan as a way of managing growth and change in the township in a way that balances the different perspectives that you have here and articulates a shared vision for the future. So I think that word balance is the one that we kept coming back to whenever we were kind of grappling with how to handle certain recommendations. In some cases, there were conflicting thoughts that we got from different members of the community. So we really tried to keep that in mind as we worked through these edits. Next slide, please. So just to make sure we're all on the same page of what we've been doing recently, after working really closely with our steering committee to review and provide comments on draft content for the plan over the winter, we had a public review period, as Max mentioned, with both in-person and online opportunities for people to share their thoughts about the draft recommendations that we put forth, as well as the character and land use map. You all had your work session on April 13th, I think, and our final steering committee meeting was on April 25th. At that meeting, we had a robust and really great discussion, I thought, with the committee regarding the full draft plan document, and took some guidance away from that meeting that also went into some of the adjustments that we made to this final draft. We asked for comments by early May, and we received comments from members of this body, as well as members of the steering committee, the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, Greene County Engineer, Beavercreek Wetlands Association, and BW Greenways. So we were taking all those into consideration. So I have a few slides here. First, highlighting some of the comments that we received from Zoning Commission members. I just want to review those, and then I have some other key changes that we made to the document that I want to make sure you're aware of. One of the comments was about naming what this plan is, and making sure that we wanted to make sure that we were consistent in terms of the name. So as Max said in his staff report, we named this plan the community plan largely for our public process to make it accessible to people and to really signal that this is a plan coming from the ideas of the community primarily, but it is technically the comprehensive land use plan. So a couple places in the document, we define that and we tried to be consistent throughout in that terminology. We clarified that the comprehensive land use plan is only for the unincorporated portion of Beavercreek Township. We explained that the relationship between the comprehensive land use plan and the zoning resolution, a couple of different places in this document, in addition to the graphic that Max showed. Next. There were some questions about which priority actions were chosen and why. When we went to the steering committee, we had presented in the draft document the actions for priority that were represented what we heard most from the community through our second round of public engagement should be top priority. We wanted to defer to that committee with respect to whether they felt that these should be the official final priority recommendations in the plan, or whether there were others that should be considered. So we did add 2 additional priority actions in this final draft based on that discussion. And then we clarified in the plan the fact that the priority actions are a result of a combination of community input, staff guidance and experience, and steering committee input. We added some clarity and a comparison of the character-based approach that we take in this plan and sort of a more conventional approach to land use. And I think Max covered that in his comments as well, but it's described in similar terms to his staff comments in the revision to the plan. We added some more information on the Community Development and Risk Department and their role in the process, just to get really clear. There are some other entities that we also sort of clarified what their role is in this document. Next slide, please. We made some minor changes to some of the actions for clarity and specificity. You know, throughout this process, we've really tried hard to use plain language that anyone can understand. You don't have to be a professional planner, but we are professional planners. So some of that language, keeps sneaking in. So we were really trying to just define everything, do everything we could to make sure that anybody reading this plan document understands what we're talking about. We clarified Public Service Department as Beavercreek Township's road department in the implementation matrix. We developed the diagram, as we discussed, showing the inputs to the community plans process and how it relates to the regulatory context and the outputs, things that will come from this plan. So those are highlights. I know there are other specific comments that some of you made, and we're happy to have a discussion of any of those this evening as well. A few of the other things that I wanted to point out to you regarding some of the changes we made. So comments on environmental resources. We did get some comments from the steering committee and others to make sure we were really clear about how we defined and what the purpose of the open space and conservation character type was and the conservation overlay. That's so important to this plan. And we just wanted to make sure that, that it was really easy, or as easy as possible for people to understand what it was about, how we derived it, et cetera. So we added some more information about that in the existing conditions analysis, and we added some more information in where we described that character type and where we described that conservation overlay. Some other comments and edits. We had some, just minor edits throughout to fix other inconsistencies besides the name. What happens through these planning processes, you're writing all the recommendations and you have to go back a number of times to make sure that you're being consistent. So we hope we caught all or really close to all of those inconsistencies, typos, some effort to improve the graphic presentation. We got some good comments from some of you and others about just the image, photo selection. That makes a big difference, and so we really wanted to try to get that right. Additional partners were identified in the implementation matrix. I know the county engineer had a number of really, I think, good suggestions for other entities, public agencies in particular, that should be included in that matrix in some of these actions. Some others had some comments as well, so that was really helpful to be able to update that and make sure we were being erring on the side of being more inclusive about who might be involved in implementing some of these actions. And then we also, this was an interesting conversation with the steering committee, made a few wording changes so that this document can be of more assistance to some public agencies when they're going after grants or other funding sources. So there are like some buzzwords that are mean the same thing as what we had in this plan. So the example given here is talking about multi-use paths. We had heard from, I think it was the county engineer and others, that that's a term that funders look for. And so if they can point to this plan and say, this plan recommends multi-use paths, that's going to be of help as they try to secure funding for some of these kinds of improvements. So those are some of the highlights. As I understand it, our next steps after a discussion tonight, if you are going to recommend adoption, would be that we would go to the township trustees, we would ask them to adopt, and then the hard work begins of implementation. Max mentioned the implementation matrix as being a really important tool. We, again, with our steering committee at the last meeting, had a really good discussion about making sure that at least on an annual basis, that matrix and this plan are revisited to assess how things are going. Many members of that committee expressed an interest in being a part of that, which I think is wonderful, so that it's not just staff that's feeling that kind of responsibility, and that there are others in the community that are also kind of going to be part of this discussion and the evaluation of how things are going with implementation. I think that's the last slide. Yes. So happy to take any questions or comments that you have, and depending on what they are, Max or I, one of us will answer or maybe tag team it a little. So really appreciate it very much.
Certainly. Thank you very much. You've worked hard on it.
Thanks.
Jeff, question?
I actually just have a general comment and a question. Again, looking at the previous version and the work that's gone into this, and someone who's sat on corporate boards and in senior leadership positions in charge of strategy, I agree with the thought that if you just develop a strategy and set it on the shelf, you don't implement, it's useless. So I applaud the fact you got an implementation plan here. The question I have, piggybacking off the comment there about the annual reviews, if you will, I'm wondering if this board and or the what bodies would be involved in hearing a report on your sort of end of year report on how you've accomplished the objective that you have in the implementation plan.
So the way we envision it is the trustees would receive an annual report. They authorize spending quite a bit of money on this, so we will keep them informed as to how we're implementing it. The zoning commission will be updated on a regular basis, not only through projects that we bring, changes to the zoning resolution where we say, hey, this is a direct result of the community plan, but can direct staff at any point to say, hey, I'd like a report on where you're at with the implementation matrix. So at any time you can choose to do that. It is our plan to do that on an annual basis with you as well.
So you're going to wait till the end of the year, or is this something you're going to be sort of capturing throughout the year?
We're going to have to figure that out, depending on when the plan gets passed this year. There are some variables that we'll need to take into account. I don't expect it will be an end of year thing, because I want to be a little bit more visible than that, I think. But
so maybe annual from the approval date or
something to that effect, or we'll choose a time where we think it'll be most visible in the fall or so. We'll work on that, but we do expect an annual review by you, the trustees. But most importantly, we want to get the steering committee, the original steering committee, back together, as many as are able, and also get their input and say, hey, this is a report to you guys.
For holding yourself accountable, and I'm just really, interested in seeing how that plays out.
Well, me too.
Bob, do you have any questions?
Not right now.
Kristen?
Not right now.
Not right now. I have a question. When you started to speak about our responsibility in approving or coming to us for approval, when we met, 15 months ago or so and said, yes, the consultant is an appropriate way to go. Was that understood then, that there was a possibility by saying, going ahead and doing that, as opposed to the zoning commission updating the land use plan, that we were giving up some sort of legal responsibility?
No, it's more just it was a passing comment about the interesting way the Ohio Revised Code looks at this.
How the
than
ORC looks at it?
Yeah, it was much more of a, from what I can't directly tell, so we're erring on the side of caution. That was really the intent of that comment. I hope it didn't stir any kind of...
I was curious by
Yeah.
it. Dawn, do you have anything to chime in about that?
No, it doesn't really specifically provide who sort of does it. And I think that's probably
Is that in our
on purpose.
bylaws then? I mean, where did it come from that it came through the zoning commission of the township then?
It was really a policy decision. If we were to err on the side of caution and have both agencies, or both your board and the board of trustees were to approve it, then whichever one is responsible has done so, right?
Technically speaking, the process has been here. We make the updates according to what trends, needs, et cetera are, and then, as usual, we send anything forward for approval with recommendations or recommendations not to approve. So that was my question about that.
And I think it's likely been left somewhat open from the legislature, because you really are looking at, when you're looking at all the townships in Ohio, that it's likely handled differently throughout. I mean, I can tell you as a law director for multiple townships, everybody does it differently. And so not even just how zoning commission works. It's amazing how different it is amongst townships. So I think that allowed for communities and entities to, depending on how they do this, to do it that way, by not legislating, this is how you have to do it.
I've never asked this question before. I've just assumed that you represented the staff, the administrative staff for Beavercreek Township. Do you do that for all 12 townships in the county?
No, in fact, in Greene County, it is only Beavercreek Township.
Okay.
In Montgomery County, I have Harrison Township and Miami Township. In Butler County, I have Ross Township and Madison Township. So
I don't know enough about those townships to draw comparisons to them, and it
They're all
probably
very
isn't
different.
relevant. Yeah.
They're very different in size, and Miami Township is home rule. Harrison Township is a very urban township.
Uh-huh.
This is sort of a little bit more of a mix.
Okay.
It's just the size. The two in Butler Township are smaller, but are going through some growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, and it's all done differently.
It's all done differently. Okay. I don't hear any other questions.
Well, I just have one on, maybe more than one, I don't know. The community input, the surveys, were they ever made public, or, I mean, I never saw anything about
Yeah,
what
that-
the actual community thought of this plan. I mean, I hear the steering committee and the consultants, but I don't really see anything in here, or I've never seen anything from actual members of the community as what they want the community to look like in the future.
There is a database of all the responses to the online survey that is going to be included in our materials that we are given, like from the process. We'll have all that raw data. It's not typically, we're trying to figure out if it goes in the appendix or not in the end, whether 200 pages of
I mean, I'd like to see
responses
that
and stuff
before
like
I recommend approval of it. I mean, I'm having a real tough time with this document, to tell the truth, so
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that.
I think staff can, once it's made available to us, which it should be relatively soon. We can make that. I know that doesn't help you with your desire to look at it before you make a decision, but I can tell you that, at least in my mind and in our planning staff's mind, that the goals and objectives that are listed and the priorities that are listed are very reflective of a wide variety of comments made by the community. And I think that's what comes out of it most, is that there is a diverse range of wants in this community. It's not a monolith.
In this plan here, do you have the list of, I know we had talked about putting the acknowledging the people that were on the steering committee. Is that
It's on
here?
like page 3 or something. of the
Yeah, it's
document.
right at the beginning of the document. It discusses.
I didn't
It's
receive
right
the
up
email,
front,
so I
yeah.
don't have that.
That's actually a very good question you asked there, and I'm just wondering how did you assimilate all that data? Did you take the average response? How did you deal with the diversity of the response?
So it's so there were 2 rounds of engagement. So the first round of engagement, which was the more generative kind of engagement. Anyway, there is also a summary memo that we made public that is part of the appendix for this plan. I don't know if it was if it was attached to this. Okay, so
It's not
for
there.
both rounds of engagement, every single comment that we received, whether it was in person or online, or we had some people doing paper, went into a database. And then we look at it and we pull out themes and do some analysis and some summary. So that first round of engagement, there is a memo that pulls from that and tries to make a connection between what we heard and the goals and the preliminary objectives for
So
the
what
plan.
did you do with the anomalies?
With the what, sorry?
The anomalies, this one person says something that's completely different from everything else, the norm, if you will. What'd you do with the anomalies?
Yeah, so it really depends on what they were. So first of all, this was, it was qualitative, right? So just take an example. Someone is really, I don't know, is opposed to calling some area out for conservation, right? But most people are supportive of that, and our own analysis shows us, right, that that's the case. So normally, or that there are grounds, to call it out for that purpose. So what we would do usually in a situation like that is, in our explanation, of why we made the decision, which made its way for the most part into the plan, we would explain that. We just
So we didn't
kind of
take the
work
time,
through.
probably didn't have the time to go back and do any research to question why those were so off. And
Well,
there
we
might be a
asked-
good, valid reason for that one anomaly that everybody else is unaware of or ignoring.
Yeah, well, the input is anonymous, right? Which is
So
to
you
make people
really
more
can't-
comfortable. So you can't go back to people. But what we tried to do, we really worked hard on trying to frame up our questions. But anytime someone had a comment, making sure we were asking them why. So the first round of engagement, we did a mapping activity where people could identify strengths and weaknesses, or assets and opportunities, I can't remember the terminology we used, and put a dot on the map and say, this is a place that really needs to change. And what we did was, we didn't just let people put the dot down and walk away. We had a whole worksheet and a discussion process, and we recorded, okay, why did you, we worked in small groups, right? So, why are people saying that this is an opportunity area, or this is a problem area? And we tried to record it and document it, and then really listen to what we heard to guide us, to help us make a decision. So that's kind of the process. We tried really hard to design the engagement to be asking those kind of why questions, because otherwise you do end up with a lot of sort of knee jerk.
defend.
I'm against this.
Yeah.
I support this no matter what. Well, we need more than that to really be able to write something meaningful into the plan and to make some of these judgments. And some of it is a judgment. I mean, there are going to be things in this plan that every single person is going to have, someone's going to have an issue with something in this plan. But our hope and our belief is that, for the most part, we are striking that balance that we're trying to achieve, and that we are generally reflecting what we think we heard.
So what value would you see in looking at that database?
Well, for me, it'd be that it actually aligns with what's in
So
the
to
final product. So
trust,
I can,
trust but
I
verify.
mean, and I trust, I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah,
I don't, but
yeah.
what I mean,
No, I just like
I
to
mean,
see.
I'd like to see what the community said, what was really presented,
Absolutely.
and with what our end product
You know,
was. I mean, I think that's important.
And when, in Max's presentation, it sounded, I picture this as a guiding map, that we still have the zoning regulations that are rules, but from his graphic, talking about the steering committee and the public input, and then it's immediately going into zoning changes as soon as this is adopted. I mean, it's like,
Well, especially considering, look at the big words on here. What are they? Rural, parks, quiet, schools. You're going to tell me that those lend themselves to immediately talk about what you're talking about, rezoning and changing everything? You know,
I mean,
if
I'm not
those are,
averse, to rezoning, but just from the presentation, it sounds like, once this is adopted, I mean, next meeting, we're gonna start changing zoning and to,
I'll just put your mind at ease. That's not. I apologize if I.
well, I mean, I'm just from the graphic
miscommunicated.
that was up there, I mean,
Oh,
I mean, you
sure.
can pull it back up, but
Yeah.
how it parlays into the zoning, I mean, the first thing on there was changing the zoning of certain areas, once this plan is adopted. And, I don't know, like I said,
You're awfully quiet. You have any thoughts, Mr. Hill?
Well, I'm at the back end of this,
Yes, you
and
are.
I can argue, I guess, on the one hand, fresh set of eyes is always good. On the other hand, I have real problems with this document, and you may or may not want to hear about that. I have some substantive problems. I have some, I'll just say it, it's a very cumbersome, loaded document to me. Okay? And if this is supposed to be the guiding light, if the purpose of this is to be the guiding light for developers and landowners, nobody's gonna read this. And I mean, has anybody ever been thrown out their first meeting?
not yet.
I told you to speak your mind. We'd like to hear it.
Okay, can we go to page 78? Can you pull it up?
Sure. Let's see here.
Strategies.
75, 76, 77, 78. All right.
There you go. Private development decisions. Property owners and developers should consider the goals, objectives, and actions of this plan in their land planning and investment decisions. Public decision makers can use the plan as a guide to consider whether private development is meeting the needs and aspirations of the township. That's what this document is about. And I shouldn't have to go to page 78 to see that. And it, I mean, there's glimpses of it in other places. I'm not trying to be critical of anyone or anything. I don't like the way that this is laid out. It's kind of akin to an employee handbook. If nobody can read it, nobody can understand it, you didn't get anywhere. And it is like a handbook. I mean, that's what it is. It's a handbook. It doesn't change the zoning. It's your constitution, basically. I mean, that's a good word. And, for instance, process. Process is important. Process in the document itself should be a one-page bullet point with an appendix explaining in detail what the process was. Implementation. Great idea. It's a checklist. It absolutely repeats everything that's in 5. With peppered with some, it's a checklist. Make it an appendix. The themes, page 12, it talks about themes that were derived from this. And it's sustainability, health and well-being, and coordination. Well, I'm not gonna poo-poo those concepts. I mean, I guess they're all important, but I would have expected the themes to be appropriate growth, appropriate infrastructure, and fiscal responsibility. Now, that's what a theme sounds like to me. Not only do we have themes, we've also got goals. And on top of the goals, we got objectives. And then we've got actions. And This can all be done in a very straightforward manner. The big elephant in the room here, which I don't think is particularly well addressed in this, is what is our growth goal as a community? Where in that document does it tell me what this community's growth goal is collectively? I know everybody has slightly different ones. Can we go to 35?
Well, to me, again, if you go and look at the big words, there's no growth goal. We don't want to do that.
You don't want it to grow?
No, I mean, if you look at those big words like that word that Max was showing us earlier, that doesn't lend itself to growth.
Well, I mean, there are things in here that are rather subjective about multi-purpose housing, about entry-level housing. I'm going to assume that that's supported by the data that y'all received. But I have a hard time getting from A to B based on this document as to why we want entry-level housing. Why do we want multiplex housing? I don't really see that in here, and I've been in the community for over 25 years. And when I talk to other people in the community at all different levels, they want to talk about managed growth, they want to talk about infrastructure, and they want to talk about fiscal responsibility. They don't want to talk about recycling, composting, home weatherproofing. There's a lot of fluff in here. And context has a place. I mean, there's no question that we need to know where we are now and where we're going. But I don't think this does a very good job of just accomplishing that very simple goal, which is, I think, is the whole purpose of this document. On this document, now, this is the proposed new plan. And I guess my question
Well,
is, I'm sorry.
It is one aspect of the plan.
Right.
It is the future character and land use map.
Well, is that appropriate for this document? Is that subjective characterization appropriate for this document? And who came up with that? I know it was all thrown into a blender, but that's the delineations that came out of the blender. Who put that together and made the decisions as to what was to go where? I don't know that.
Okay.
Is that something that you got from the feedback from the community? Is that how that came to be?
So multiple steps in the process. So we start with an existing land use analysis, right? Make sure we're clear about what the existing land use is. Our first round of public engagement then had a mapping activity where we asked folks for their input about, what kind of what they, do and don't like, for lack of simplified, but about Beavercreek Township, and solicited comments about where, they might want to see change and things that they want to see preserved and maintained more aligned with how they are today. We then went to the steering committee and we had a couple of work sessions where we worked through what these character types, how we describe them. And it was actually generated from the steering committee, thoughts about how we talk about the different kinds of places that exist in the township, whether there are kinds of places that maybe don't exist that people might want to see more of and describe. So we worked through kind of what are the categories of things. So all these character types, we worked closely with the steering committee on defining. We had a conversation then with the steering committee at a second meeting where we talked about, okay, where do some of these character types apply? A lot of, in many of the areas, there was a strong feeling that, people don't want to see change, right? They want it to reflect what's there today. But then there were a few areas where we talked about, people wanting to see change. And so we worked through a couple of drafts of a map to reflect that. In our second round of engagement, we then presented a map like this in a draft form. We asked community members for their feedback. I should say that also Max and Randy, brought some technical expertise, to the table about, listen, this is the area where we've seen this kind of development, and we've heard, based on their experience, working with you all, et cetera. So then our second round of engagement, we came with a draft of this map, and we asked members of the public whether they thought we were getting it right, whether there were areas where they would like to see something different. We brought it to you all, to the township trustees. And we made some adjustments, based on what we heard, both the comments on the map and some other comments, that we received that related, that maybe weren't explicitly, someone on the map, but related. And then we came up with the draft that was in the previous document. We may have made one or two changes. I'd have to go back to my detailed notes based on the comments we received in that final, or that most recent review period over the last 2 months. And that's what's reflected in the plan today.
So is there anywhere in here that says where the information was gathered? Like, would that help you? Like, if it said community input because of blah, 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 this is where Beavercreek proceeds or the township proceeds.
I think, this is sort of a mystery document in terms of.
Well, especially from an outsider, because
Right.
she's so close to it, the steering committee is so close to it. So if you do look at it, I can understand how you'd be like, where did you even get that information from? I could see that.
I don't think, I truthfully don't think this is an appropriate document for this plan. I think it's gonna pigeonhole you.
Oh, lend itself to, people
Yeah,
are gonna see that
some
that's.
things are forever, and this is a forever document.
Well-
And so I
well-
think, if you want to attach an appendix that says that this is one
A potential possible way, yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing, but this is presented as though it's some kind of a gospel.
of how we'll actually do it.
Well, I will say though that, one, it's actually not a forever plan. It should be something that's reviewed anywhere between 5 to 10 years. Now, that doesn't realistically always happen, but I can tell you, it isn't gospel, but it does serve the purpose in terms of when you are making zoning decisions as to what, if you've got an area, and I can't see what the different labels are, but if somebody all of a sudden in the part that's red, which I assume is business.
Right here, yeah.
Yeah, wanted to put in some type of residential development, just using this for an example, it is something then that as a zoning commission and as the board of trustees do actually refer to the land use plan for purposes of determining whether or not it is consistent with what the ideas of where the community wants the development to go. So I think it is important, actually, at least from a legal standpoint, you do rely on a map such as this. Again, and it evolves over time because development will change and things will change over time. But it is important to sort of delineate the types of development in the types of areas that are sort of where the township wants to go. And so I actually do think it's appropriate to have, a map. If in fact that's the way that the input was, that's actually very common to see that in a land use plan.
And I agree with that. I think it ought to be de-emphasized, and I think it ought to be explained. But I see this as an appropriate document at the resolution ordinance phase. I don't see it as appropriate, something that, again, pigeonhole, something that, Gordon White will eat you alive with that if you try to change it. It's just, I don't know. I think it's counterintuitive for that to be part of your constitution. To have a very specific plan resting in the middle of it. I don't know how important it is. I just don't see it as all that important. And again, there's some languages in here that, when you start talking about entry-level housing and multi-biz housing and all that, if it's in your constitution, you're stuck with it. So I'd like to see, I like the concept. I like, there's some really good stuff in here. I like a lot of the concepts. I like the delineation of the different uses. But I think it goes a little too far in terms of the township needs flexibility. And I'm afraid this is going to take some flexibility away.
Now, I do think the current land use
I was
plan has a
gonna-
similar
yeah,
map like
I
this
was gonna
already
say.
that's
Yeah.
in place.
Yeah, so this is an
Well, the
update.
comparison
Yeah, it's-
between the
it's
two
true.
seem to
Yeah.
be lacking in my mind, but that doesn't mean that it can't be put in.
Or just, what about the word, look down at the bottom, if you scroll down at the bottom, it says future. What if you just say potential? That's an open word where it says, we're not
But
saying
that
this
it
is
stops
definitely-
serving the purpose it's intended for, which now you guys, I think this board focuses a lot on looking at an area and saying, oh, this says this can be developed. I think what you are missing sometimes is all this area that's designated as rural residential or traditional agriculture, or that is essentially being protected from development by this very map. So I think that's sometimes lost in the discussion here. I think you guys are focusing on what could be developed and not focusing on what is protected from
Well,
development.
and I was thinking about that. I mean, like if you look at, on Fairground, all the green and whatever, and somebody said, hey, I want to throw up a gas station,
Yeah.
and they came in and said that, I know that we could say, well, according to this land map use, that's not something that we see as a foreseeable thing. We could
Without
move it
that,
somewhere.
without that,
Yeah, it'd be much
we
harder
do
to
not
have a
have a
reason.
way to legally defend that decision, and so we get sued, or we get annexed, or we get. Do you understand? You see what I'm saying? That
Yeah. I mean, it can
it
work
does
on
serve a
both sides.
purpose.
I mean, it's both sides, and I get that, and I do see it on both sides and how you can use it, how it could pigeonhole us, but at the same time, it does give us the ability to limit potential growth.
Last comment, is the document needs work. Can you go to page 88?
Yep. There we go.
I'm looking at the top of it.
Okay. Is there?
Objective number 3, support culture of community belongings, intergenerational diversity, equity, inclusion, tolerance, etc. Coordinate with Greene County Department of Sanitary Engineering. There are typos, there are problems like that throughout this document. I'm sorry, but coordinating with the Greene County sanitary sewer infrastructure has nothing to do with diversity.
But it actually does when you talk about the distribution of quality water.
I think that's where that came from. 'Cause that's why they're identified as an additional partner, not the lead.
Well,
I mean,
that's a very poor connection to me.
And it can be reworded. It needs work.
I think belonging is the word that I would get hung up on, because it's more about the quality of service that you would provide to somebody, considering their diversity, equity, inclusion,
well,
and so
and
forth.
I think it's really important too that it's an objective under a goal. The goal focuses on facilities, service, and infrastructure. So within that realm, then we are focusing on equity and inclusion of all peoples for these services and facilities. And so that's why it's broken into goals and then objectives and actions, because it's important to think about the context in which it's being listed. In this case, this is about supporting good utilities that are equally shared among all residents of Beavercreek Township. There are some people who are on well water. There are some people who are on sanitary and sewer. And the difference between what happens when a tornado runs through and your well gets damaged versus what happens when a tornado runs through and you are connected to a city and water, that's what we're talking about here. So it's really important to look at all of the aspects when you're considering these individual pieces.
I mean, what, the grant money take care of that? I mean, you look at Greene County's tap-in fee for city water. 15, 20 grand. I mean, that's not affordable to a lot of people.
And this gives us a directive to maybe look at that. We can't obviously change their tap-in
I mean,
fee,
I know
but
they
we
can't
could
change the
certainly
fees, but I mean,
say, hey, look, we think that this is a barrier to equity for access to water, and so let's have a conversation about it. And then they'll say, well, what right have you? And we'll say, hey, look, this is a goal that our community has set for us. So,
Well,
Equal access is an easy concept. That's not what that says.
I think you said it well when it still needs a bit more work. And I appreciate you putting yourself out there. first time around and telling it the way you're seeing it with fresh eyes. It's important. Thank you.
I was getting different drafts, and y'all have to admit, you dreaded each one. It's heady stuff, but this is heady material. I get it. My hat's off. I mean, you know, I'm sure she's really good at what she did. This particular document doesn't seem to meet my personal impressions of the community, and not just my world, just the community. And I don't think it is a usable document. I don't think that it's going to get you to what's expressed on page 78 in an easy manner, which is helping property owners decide what to do with their property and helping the township decide what we're going to let them do with the property. That's the nuts of this thing.
Okay, so moving along on our agenda. I think we've heard from everybody. It's probably time to open the public portion of the meeting. Okay with moving on? Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, opening the public portion of the meeting. Are there any residents here who are for, against, or neutral on the topic?
Or neutral on the topic, but
Neutral on the topic, okay.
is it okay if we tag team it? You guys mind?
Sure.
Yeah, we did. Okay.
I've seen you before.
Yes, so we're former Wright State graduates. We actually did some work on this project, so we just have a couple concerns we'd like to see maybe changed potentially. Brittany Woodruff, I live at 2160 Hirschman Road in Dayton.
Hi guys, my name is Kaylin Speed. I live at 151 Sheringham, Kettering, Ohio.
So you're not residents of the township,
We are
but
not.
you participated in the project.
Correct.
Got it.
So we have a couple concerns. We are actually the students who completed the door-to-door surveys. So we did 77 door-to-door surveys. We'd kind of like to see that included in your plan here. Also in your plan on page 17, it speaks about public engagement. We'd like to see it included that Wright State Community Health students completed the door-to-door surveys. I believe right now it just says Wright State nursing students. That basically implies all of Wright State.
I think that when you saw the original draft,
Okay.
because I went back before you all graduated to say, here's your project, and this is how it came to fruition.
Say we were given it in like March
Yeah,
or
so
April, I
your
believe.
page number might not
Okay.
be accurate.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Anyway, somewhere on it just says Wright State nursing students. That implies all of Wright State nursing students. We'd kind of like to see all our names put on there. There was 10 of us who completed this survey. So we'd like to see our names included, or a little bit more specific at least, our class, maybe the year. We'd also like to see, when we were doing these door-to-door surveys, we were given a map by Max. We'd kind of like to see that included. We are actually only allowed in certain communities, so that doesn't really represent all of Beavercreek Township properly. We were only allowed in communities that had sidewalks and streetlights. I believe that was for safety concerns, so we were walking on sidewalks. We did go to one or two that did not have sidewalks, but we only interviewed neighborhoods north of 35. So I believe there was about 4 or 5 neighborhoods that were not assessed. So we'd kind of like to see the map that was assessed included. And then, as all of you guys are speaking, we actually do have the results. We actually have an Excel spreadsheet. I don't know if you guys have seen it. We probably still have it. I don't have it on me today.
I think I have it on my phone. But we filled out an Excel spreadsheet for Max with all of the findings that we found and what we thought with the questions that he provided. It's important to mention though that the vast majority of the community was not for adding anything. They wanted more green space. They wanted to keep the green space is what they wanted. Very rarely, I think I had one lady who was like, put a Gucci in.
Well,
I don't think it's going in Dayton.
I can see that, or Louis Vuitton. I'd be
Louis
okay with
Vuitton.
that.
But that was the only woman who I can recall through all of our surveys that we did. We split into 2 groups. We covered a lot of land in the day that we did this, who was like, I want that. The rest of them were like,
Most people say
Keep our green
more
space.
green space, less development. We want multi-connection trails for the bike paths, things like that. But yeah, we do have those survey results that can be accessed, I believe. So I believe those were the three things we were concerned about. Our names being mentioned or more specific, maybe an addition of the map of the places we were allowed to survey or that got surveyed. And then we also made a PowerPoint presentation that I believe was presented to the other committee. I believe it was I can't remember what it was called. What committee was it?
It was probably presented to the trustees.
Yeah, to the trustees. So we had a PowerPoint presentation. It was voiceovered. We completed it all ourselves as a group, as our class project. So we also have a summary findings that we would like to see included, just saying what the people in Beavercreek Township said they would like to see as changes.
So just to quickly address a couple of those, this acknowledgement was changed to the Wright State University School of Nursing. We'll have to do some internal conversations as to whether or not that's going to include any more information about individual students. The map and the answers, the spreadsheet you provided, those are all going to be part of the appendix information. So that will be in the plan, quote unquote. It will not be in this first, public facing half the document. For those interested in, it will be available. Addressing your third comment that the overwhelming majority of people you talked to talked about open space and no further development or managed development. That's a theme we saw in some of our other public engagement comments from our online survey, which, if I'm not mistaken, we ended up with something like 200 plus answers. But there were a significant, number of residents that talked about wanting amenities that can only happen when you build a new building, because we don't have a coffee shop in Beavercreek Township. We don't have easy access to groceries within Beavercreek Township. So some of these things that our residents talked about are the opposite of that, right? And that's, I think, the important thing to think about in this plan is the word balance. This plan tries to strike a balance between those opposing ideas, right? Hey, stop building. Well,
I think
that's
it's hard
extreme.
though, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I feel like one of the reasons why, at least in my opinion of living here, is that we talk about, yeah, I'd like a coffee shop, but every single time that we come to a meeting, all we do is approve a new subdivision or change, that's all I've done since I've been here. Everything that we've done has been about building houses. There's been nothing else that we have ever talked about. So I don't know who's gonna go out there and start bringing in the coffee shops, but I would like to see some of that. The only thing that we've brought to the township, has been houses. That's it. So I get that and I understand that and I feel the same way. And that was one of the things in my responses was that I would like something like that, but that's never anything that we are presented with. So I don't know how you manage that growth.
So sticking to the agenda, public portion of the meeting is still open, not to cut you off.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Ladies,
I didn't
thank
interrupt
you for coming. I have a question about all this, though. How did you find this tonight? I'm just curious.
So we knew that in April was kind of like we actually gave this document to you around graduation time. We never really heard back, so we kind of were just following up to make sure our voices were heard. And we want the credit that we deserve, so we kind of like to see our names on there instead of just Wright State, because that's kind of just broad.
And you said the two of you were the other 8. If they're, what makes you representatives of the group?
We are new grad nurses, so
Okay.
we're kind of busy working 12s, doing orientation, changing our entire lives to adapt to our graduation.
So 2 of the 10 of us who did the surveys were only able to make it, but we're speaking for all of us. We all signed the document. We put it together, so.
We just think it's important to advocate for Beavercreek Township as well and the people that we spoke to.
So I sat on it. I admit that I sat on it. The reason that I sat on it is because I gave you results that came from our work group, or when we came together as a unit, and told you how the document was looking, just to show you what the fruits of your labor looked like I'm really proud of you that you've been able to follow it through all the way to the end. Kudos to you. The State House needs some people to talk about staffing ratios now. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. Anything else? So that's a matter of record. Is that what you're asking for? I mean, because I certainly didn't give it to
Yeah, I
anyone.
mean, you guys can have this. If you want, but
Right, so,
we're mostly just here to try and get
give
credit
it
for our
to
project.
Lori
and
to your
make sure
right
everybody's
there, and
voices
she
are
will,
heard, so.
she will process it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Uh-huh. No one else is here to discuss, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting. It's time now. When you bring this to us, we have already a motion, correct? Or do we need a motion?
No, I don't believe,
So-
I'm sorry, I'm not
So I'm
understanding
just
your
trying to
question.
follow Robert's rules. When you have something on here, is it already a motion that needs to be seconded and discussed? Or is it, I need to
There is-
entertain a motion at this point to accept or not to
Right,
accept this?
there's no motion before you.
You're not bringing one
You
forward,
have
so
to make it, yes.
I'm ready to entertain a motion on case number 834.
So you want the motion, how do you want it?
Well, usually in the
motion to what?
affirmative is usually how we do it.
Right,
Then you
that's
can
why you
vote
said
in
it
either
for.
direction.
Yes, right,
Yes,
so that's
correct.
right.
I'm sorry.
I will make the motion that we adopt the case number 834, motion to accept as presented by staff.
Okay. Any seconds?
I'll second
Discussion?
We're all discussed out.
We're discussed out. Lori, you're on.
All right. Try to do it in the order this time. Mr. Brown,
it. Yes.
Mr. Geist,
No.
Ms. Horton,
No.
Mr. Porter,
No.
Ms. Dalton.
No. No.
Thank you, board. You do have some additional, you have a set of minutes before you that are for your consideration. And that is the rest of the agenda.
We do. Can you pull them up?
I would like to note too that Anne's name still doesn't have the doctor in front of it. Like that was one of the changes. I don't know if that's something that I can say, but I want to.
It is.
It isn't in there, but
No, I mean, it is something you
Oh,
can
okay.
say.
I didn't know if I could. It was, but it's not in there because we had mentioned it before. I
I'm
think
sorry,
we
I
did
wasn't
that.
aware of that.
That's okay. If you earn that, you should like have that out there.
I think it's from the nursing perspective that's important.
I'll make sure that gets done.
National campaign to have nurses on boards.
Okay, so we've got, I will make the changes, from, in the address for Anne. Anything else? Or did everything else look okay?
That was everything. No, that was just what I just noticed. Cause
I'm gonna loss on next steps.
Yeah.
We'll
Are you
have
talking
to-
about the minutes? Just
Are you
make
talking
sure.
about the minutes, or are you talking about the?
No,
You were talking about the land use.
She was talking about the land use plan.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry, I
so-
thought you were talking about the minutes.
Oh no, I'm talking about the minutes. No, no, we haven't talked about those. That's why I said I didn't know if I could talk about that right now.
You
didn't
can
know what
say
we were
it,
doing.
but it's kind of it's a dead issue at this
Oh, okay.
point until
Oh, 'cause
we receive
we
next
changed
steps.
The next steps. Okay. Okay, go ahead with the minutes. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm like this.
Okay, minutes, are they up?
Do you have those up?
Do you have them?
I will pull them up for you if you like.
And I was trying to use a pencil and look. I need a sharpener.
Lori, do you, there we go. Yes. No.
Unless you wanna go to the, I mean, I copied you in, but if you wanna. go
Are they
to
in the
P drive.
folder? Thanks. That's what I was
Yeah,
trying
go
to
to P drive and then zoning commission and then meeting minutes.
Thank you.
While you're bringing those up, are there any still outstanding from any
Yes.
previous years?
And I'm working on,
Okay. And the ones from this evening, will they be able to be presented to us
Yeah.
at the next
You'll have one
meeting.
for the next one,
Okay.
as well as some old.
Here you are, board.
There we go. And I did send them out the other day.
Mhm.
I looked over. I think they're
Scroll down to the end.
I wasn't here, so.
I know you weren't. Before the paragraph before the adjournment.
My glasses are broken. There we go.
It's accurate that I recall. Is it accurate as you recall it, Bob?
You're talking about the,
Yes.
let's see.
Oh, about the availability for June 8th?
No, it wasn't that. It's the part about the timeline.
Yeah, no,
Jeff, you good with it? I think everything else was okay. Rick?
I'm all right.
You good, Bob? Jeff? With that last paragraph?
I'm
Before
sorry?
before adjournment, that last paragraph, is it okay? Motion to approve them.
Okay, what's the question?
Is it okay? Is it
Yeah,
accurate?
I don't have any issue with that.
Okay, good. All
I
right.
make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second the motion.
So, I think Rick,
Oh.
Rick.
It was faster.
Perfect, thank you, Rich. Wasn't sure you'd wake up over there.
He was ready to go.
You're on cue for the next one.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Geis?
Yes.
See, Ms. Horton, you weren't
I
there, but
wasn't
you
there.
can still.
Oh, I'll say yes.
Mr. Porter,
Yes.
Ms. Stalter.
Yes.
I wasn't putting me.
Okay, you're on, Jeff.
Who's on?
Make a motion, we adjourn
Oh,
1 June
I second.
zoning commission
I have
meeting.
to go to the bathroom.
Okay, hang on to it, Jeff, first. You didn't have anything else, did you? Is that-
Nope.
that was it? And Kristen, second.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Kristen has to go.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Geis?
Yes.
Ms. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Ms. Stalter?
Yes.
Board?
We are.